Because of the way the universe is created, we each of us live in two worlds at the same time. We have to live in the outer life of our own bodies and the inner life of our own souls.
Hello and welcome to Living the Inner Life. I'm your host, Chris Sheridan, and I want you to join with me on a journey into our inner lives, our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, everything that helps shape the way we interact with and respond to the outside world. And if we can utilize our tools of consciousness, we can live a better life, inner, outer, and in our total experience. Well, one thing that we tend to experience a lot is fear. Now, FDR said in his famous speech that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And I've heard that for many, many years, and I'm like, well, isn't that enough just to be afraid of fear? Now I have to be fearful of fear if I didn't have enough to worry about already. Well, I'm not exactly sure what he was getting at. I can't speak for him. But in my experience, a lot of the times what I have been afraid of, that I've had some anticipation or trepidation about something upcoming, something pending, something hanging over, like the sword of Damocles, that is giving me fear, that I am afraid of, I am wanting to avoid, or I want to reject, I want to run the other way. And a lot of times, maybe most of the times, a lot of what I was afraid of, or the way in which I was afraid of this thing, really didn't pan out. It really wasn't that bad. It may have been more of a paper tiger than an actual tiger, and it wasn't going to bite me. But you can take something and think about it, obsess over it, run through all the potential scenarios or contingencies or outcomes of this pending issue, and you can come up with all kinds of disastrous ways of thinking about it, the ways that are going to make you feel afraid about it. And fear in the sense of, rejection or avoidance, or just plain old being scared. A lot of times, so many times, it's like after the fact, well, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I had made it out to be beforehand. If it's a confrontation, say, with a coworker or somebody else, and you finally have that talk, there's a release or a relief that goes through doing that. But all the time before then, leading up to it, it can be annoying. It can be fearful. Okay? And that may be what FDR was getting at. Maybe the thing to fear is not the thing that you are fearful about, if that really in the end doesn't end up being all that bad. It's the fear that is causing more of the trouble than the hidden danger or perceived negativity about a situation. Okay, so it can be driven from past experience. It can be driven from being uncertain about something. The future is always something you can become fearful about. You can also become hopeful and excited about the future. But it can also be, especially when there's uncertainty, like in a major area, like where you're going to live next, or if you are changing careers, what are you going to do next? Or at midlife, and then you have an empty nest, the kids have left and all grown up, and it's like, now what do I do? Okay, so there can be fear about the future, and there can be fear about our place in the world. And to obsess on the fear, it's, I think, the thing that drives it. And it can become more devastating, more destructive than that thing that you're afraid of. All right? And now, this can trigger in us the fight, flight, or freeze response. Okay? That's our sympathetic nervous system. And it kicks in, it works a little something like this. If there's a perceived danger that it will kick you into high gear. This is very primal. This goes back to survival as primitive man. Okay. And we had very good reason to be afraid of a lot of things. I think there's only a few natural fears that we have, like heights or loud noises, perhaps even the dark, but those are ingrained in us because those are things that tell us, hey, danger, look out. They're more of a warning sign meant to help us, not to really hinder us. Okay, so these are things that if they come up, they require our attention and some sort of a response. But if there is something out there, or it seems like there's something out there, like a snake in the grass, for instance, you can look at that and go, oh my God, there's a snake. And you can fight, and that would be to grab a shovel and try to whack the thing. Or you can flight, that means to flee, run away, you can turn around and run. Or you can freeze, and I think that's what happens with a lot of us, especially when it's not something like an oncoming train or some external danger. If it's something more emotional or having something to do with our personality or our character or our ego, it can become really freezing, paralyzing, in fact. Okay? You can't fight, you can't run, you stay there, and you just kind of do nothing and hope the thing passes or you forget about it or whatever is going to happen next. Well, nature gives us the fight-flight response and the counter response when the danger leaves. So when you perceive a danger, this fight or flight mechanism kicks in and it increases your heart rate and blood pressure, because you need more energy if you're going to fight or run, and it slows down your digestion and a lot of other things, a lot of your other body processes, because you don't need them right now, okay? You need all your energy going to this situation. Your eyes are more open, your ears are hearing in a more acute way, and you're all about this clear and present, perceived or otherwise, danger that is causing you to get ramped up. And then what happens afterwards, say in the fight scenario, you kill the snake with a shovel, well then you're like, yeah, I've saved the world, I saved the day, I killed the monster, I slayed the dragon. And then the danger is over. And what happens is physiologically, your body changes back not only to its normal state, but it gives you a rush of chemicals and enzymes, proteins that bring your digestion back. You have this release. You can laugh. There's kind of a sensation going on. And that is necessary because it turns off that fight or flight. You don't need it anymore. And you can't sustain that. That's like an emergency power. Okay, it's a power that has to kick in, but you can only use it for short bursts, okay, when it's really needed, because it wears on your system, okay, and especially if other systems like your digestion is slowing down or stopped when you're in this fight or flight situation, well, that can cause chronic problems if you stay in the fight or flight forever. But most normal circumstances, that means like an external danger, you're either going to fight it and kill it, the danger's over, or you're going to flee successfully, you're going to outrun the thing, and you're okay, whether it's a storm or a tiger or whatever's trying to come after you. And once the danger's passed, then same thing, you get this release, this relief, these chemicals that make you feel really good because you survived, okay? And then your digestion returns, your heart rate goes back to normal, and everything gets eventually back to where it needs to be. But in the freeze part of it, especially as I was saying, something that's not quite a physical external danger, okay? Because those will end quickly. Either you're going to get bit by the snake or killed by the storm, or you're going to outrun the storm, or you're going to kill the snake, or outrun the snake, or whatever it is you're going to do. It's either going to get you or it's not. Either way, it's going to be over soon. But if it's a perceived fear, or if it's something that you're chronically in a fearful state about, the future, your financial condition, a health issue, anything in relationships, really anything in life, if you obsess over it, or you're worried about what somebody else is thinking about you, you can obsess on this and you can make it into a huge monster. And it may not even really be a real thing. Okay? Because if it's taking place up here, there's no snake or tiger out there. It's inside. And we can kick in this fight or flight mechanism at any given time. And for a sustained period of time, it can become chronic. You can have this fear every day, and it wreaks a havoc on your body. Okay? So we have to do something about that, right? Can't stay in fear all the time. All right? So what can you do about it? Well, there's an acronym for fear that's called false evidence appearing real, FEAR. That kind of makes sense. And the more real we make it, the more fearful we will become. Like FDR said, that's that fear itself. Okay, but the false evidence, a lot of times the thing that we're afraid about is kind of made up. Now, it's not entirely contrived. It has to have some basis in logic or reality or reason, or you wouldn't really latch on to it. Okay, but you could take a little bit, a kernel of fear or truth to something that may be fearful, and you can turn that into this huge monster that's almost impossible to fight or flee from. So look at the evidence. Go back and check. Is this thing true? Is this real? Should I really be afraid of this? And if it's a situation that you're facing, whether it's a job move or a move with your residents or any other kind of life change, look back in your past and ask yourself, well, have I experienced anything like this before? Have I gone through this before? And if so, what happened? Well, if you're asking that question, you at least survived it, okay? Or you wouldn't be here to be asking that question. And you can draw from your past, because we sometimes forget. We have this strange amnesia capacity, especially forgetting some of the good things or the smart things that we need to learn from, things from our own experience. But if we can go back and say, if it's about a move, okay, you're anticipating a move and you're afraid that your credit may not go through, you may not find a place even, you may not like it after you get there, and then you're stuck with a lease. I mean, there's a lot of, moving is almost a traumatic first world problem. It's something that it can destroy relationships and really cause a lot of problems beyond the problematic issues, the logistical concerns with moving. It's already difficult to begin with physically, and then it becomes this whole mental, emotional trauma as well. But look back in your past. Okay, well, I moved out of the house when I was a teenager. That was rough, but yeah, I made it through. I found a way, and I discovered that there were other people going through the same thing, and I found other people my age to talk to, and it really wasn't that bad. And looking back, maybe that was, I wonder why I was so afraid of that. And maybe that's happened several times in your life up to this point. And if now you're facing a potential move, then you can say, well, geez, the 4 other times I've made a significant move in my life, it actually turned out okay. So that would give you reason to expect this one to turn out okay. All right? It shouldn't be a complete mystery if you've had experience in this area before. Or if it's a financial condition that you're in, have you been in a financial bind before? If so, what was that like? What happened? Well, I lucked out at the last minute and found somebody who needed to hire me for 3 weeks, and that saved the day. I came out of nowhere. Well, maybe that same thing will happen too. Okay, now you still have to do the work. Okay, it's still a lot of work to move. It's still a lot of work to try to pay for some unexpected bills, or if you have increased expenses, it can be difficult to cover that, and you have to do the work, literally or mentally, that is needed to overcome this, to get through this. But draw from your own experience, okay? This false evidence appearing real. The false part would be, oh, what is this? A move? What am I going to do? Gosh, I've never done this before. It seems like it's the first time. I might feel that way. But if you have done it before, it's not the first time, and you have made it through those other times, you will make it through this. This is where faith comes in. Okay, fear may actually be the opposite of faith. Faith is the belief in things unseen. They say seeing is believing. Well, you believe the things you see. You have to have faith to really believe the things that you can't see. And one of the things we can't really see is the future. We don't know what this is going to be like when we get there, if this is a move. There may be problems, okay? There may be wonderful things. There's probably going to be a little bit of everything. Isn't that usually the case? So draw from your experience. Say, you know what? Wait a minute. I have been through this before, something like this. This is different now. This is a new one. But I have experienced major changes like this. And those at the time felt just as fearful, just as unreasonable or overwhelming. But I somehow made it through. Draw from that. Use that as faith instead of fear to push you through, to help you get to the other side of whatever this move or change or transition is in your life. Okay, so false evidence appearing real. And the fear is real, but maybe the way in which you're looking at it, the things that, all the scenarios, what if this happens? What if that happens? Well, there's always a what if, okay? And you've made it through 101 or 1,001 what ifs in the past. You'll probably make it through this one, especially if you have before. You know you can do it again. So this false evidence, isn't that interesting? False and evidence. Usually evidence, you think empirical observation that, I have the evidence, I have the receipts, but this false evidence, how can that be? All right. You make it up. It's appearing. You build a case, almost like a lawyer, and you gather this evidence, this false evidence, and you bring it to bear on your situation, and it's a real problem. Okay. So beware the false evidence. There's another acronym for fear that goes, forget everything and run. That's that fight or flight, more of the flight part of that. Actually, the way I heard it first was F everything and run. All right. And sometimes we feel like that too. You just want to run the other way instead of face. That's why they call it facing your fears. How do you face your fears? Okay. You don't look at your fear in the back of the head. You don't try to smush your fear. You don't do other things. You face it face to face. And those are the hardest things. And a lot of times in fearful situations or situations that we make very fearful, a lot of times it brings out our vulnerability. A lot of times it's something that hits home, something that speaks to your truth. Okay? And that can make it fearful. Well, we want to protect ourselves. And, your people say, well, it got too real. Or, well, I don't want to go there. Well, that is real. And you do have to go there. Because this fearful thing, a lot of times, is ourselves that we're facing. Or something within the situation, or this change, or this perceived danger involves us having to look at ourselves, having to bring something out of ourselves, express ourselves in a certain way. call up on powers and strengths that we may not realize that we have. Okay, so that's the inner life version of a fear. A lot of even if it's this false evidence manufactured and being perpetuated and strengthened inside you, that's all inner life stuff. But when these fears have within them something that threatens us, and it doesn't have to be our physical life. In a lot of ways, those are somewhat easier to deal with, ironically, than some of these things that maybe aren't quite the actual factual life-threatening or other kind of danger like that. If it's our character, if it's our reputation, if it's our ego, if it's our position in a group or in the community or society, if it's anything like that that has something to do with our sense of self, okay? Maybe you get humiliated or something. Your fear of humiliation is a huge thing. A lot of people are afraid of what other people might think of them. Oh, I just want people to like me. And if I do that, I'm afraid they're going to think bad of me or something like that. And in today's culture, there may be some truth to that. But you still have to, if you want to live an authentic life, you still have to face those things, which is really facing yourself in the face of fear. Okay? So don't let the fear become more fearful than the thing feared about, if that makes any sense. Okay? If our reputation is tarnished, if we do get embarrassed on social media, if we do have our character put into question or our reputation tarnished, whether that was founded or undeserved, either way, it is something that we have to let go and say, well, okay, so what? All right, what's the worst that can happen? That may be something that you want to call into question and think about. If you're so worried about your reputation that something you say or do might, based on somebody else's idea, some way threaten who you are, well, then you need to strengthen who you are. A little more confidence, a little more sense of self, and a little less worried about what other people may or may not think, because a lot of times we don't know. A lot of these fears start out based in something factual, but get magnified into something that is really not factual. Okay? So don't let the fear get in the way. Face the thing. And whether that's the lights turning off, if you're afraid of the dark, or whether that's fear of just the unknown, have the faith that you can make it through this. You've done it before. You can do it again. This may be a new situation, but you're not new to this game. You've done it before. Have that faith in yourself and the great beyond. Providence may smile upon you in this time of difficulty. And without this fear going on, you're going to be able to actually see more clearly what it is you need to do and make the situation, make the outcome much more favorable and without all this extra fear. So that's a little thought on fear, and I hope you're not afraid to do the next bold thing, the courageous thing in your life, because you know you deserve it. And we'll see you next time here on Living the Inner Life.